Hello, so I'm making a video game where I'm using a texturing technique that doesn't require any PNG files, but it only takes one material file in order to give different objects completely unique customizable looks. So if you look, this sword is using the same material as this knight and this spaceship and this lamppost. But with this lamppost, we have an emissive. We also have a slight emissive with the spaceship, but then we don't have any sort of emissive on the sword or the knight. Also, I'm going to show you how to use this same technique in order to create variations in a textured model as opposed to an untextured one. So this barrel is actually using the same material for the red barrel and the yellow barrel. And what's happening here is I'm using a tinting effect without having to create multiple texture files. So for example, if I open this up in the file explorer, the PNG file is 1 megabyte in size, but let's say I wanted to have a red barrel or a yellow barrel or a purple barrel or whatever, then all I need to do is duplicate the asset and modify it inside of a 3D software, and it'll create this effect without having to do anything with the shader or the material. And this object is only 30 kilobytes in size, so you can basically have 50 to an infinite number of different colored barrels without costing too much storage for your project. So in order to use this technique, it requires you to texture paint it inside of a 3D software. And so in this example, I'm going to use Blender. I'm going to start out, I'm going to model a simple sword. So now that my model is finished, I'm going to apply a vertex color value to each of the vertices. It's pretty simple. So what you do is you enter vertex paint, and then you press this button that allows you to create a mask, because right now if I apply a color, it'll apply it to the whole thing. So what we want to do is select this and then press this, and then you press L and you can select the whole thing, and then you go back into paint, change it to the color that you want. I'm going to do a kind of a dark blue, gray sort of color. And then, let's see, maybe a little bit brighter. And then you press set vertex color, come back into here, select this. Let's say I want to make this what do I want to do? So we're having a dark blue. I want to do a gold sort of aesthetic. And then we come into here, do something a little beige orange. Dark brown gold, and we do set vertex colors. And then one random thing to note, it is a fairly good idea to save out these values, so you can just copy the hex value. I'm just gonna eyeball it, but if you're trying to make a game and you want to have a consistent color palette across it, just copy and paste the hex key. Okay, so I went ahead and I skipped forward in the texturing process since this is not a texturing tutorial. One thing that I forgot to mention is you don't necessarily just have to fill it in. Like, the vertex paint has a lot of control here. You can paint individual vertices and you can get nice, cool gradients and texture. So you can paint this tip like a fiery orange, and then add like another color here, and then we have this red fiery tip. So you can do all sorts of variations and colors within these individual vertices. I'm gonna just go back to the normal sword, and I'm going to export it. Nothing special that I need to export it with, just typical settings, don't bake the animation, so on. Export it. Okay, so we have our sword, and now we need the shader. It's a very simple shader. It's literally one node, but I'll remake it right here. Vertex color test. So we come in here, we load this up. All we need is to grab the vertex color and geometry, and we plug it in there. And then we come back into our scene. Right click on this. It's a very simple trick. You right click on the shader, the actual shader file, and then you come up here and you press material. It'll automatically create a material out of that shader. So then we create our material. We click on our item, come to the mesh renderer slot, drag it into the material slot, and then it shows the vertex color values that we set inside of Blender. One thing to note, so the actual color values will be slightly different than Blender, and it's just the way things get rendered. If I put this sword inside of Unreal Engine or the CryEngine or Godot, it would be a completely different color there as well. And so what you can do is just add a little let's say contrast, and add this node, and then all we need to do is multiply, and or not multiply, let's say contrast, and then plug it into there, contrast into that. I default it to 1 so it doesn't change anything unless you want it to. I come back into the scene, and then if I come to the actual material, I can up the contrast here to make the item pop just a little bit more, because it's a little dull. It looks muted inside of the Unity engine. So this just helps give it a little sparkle. To set up the emission effect, what we need to do is we need to convert this to an HSV format, color space conversion. So we take the vertex color, and we need to just get the basic value. So for example, we can split this, then plug it into here, and then we're going to take the B value, because that's the third value in the HSV, and then we're going to get a comparison, and in this comparison we need to plug in another float. So let's create that here, emissive, and we're going to call it emissive threshold. It's just the comparison brightness value that is going to tell the vertex color shader when to use it as an emission, and if it's not greater or equal to this value, then it'll set it to black. So then we do that with this, get a branch, plug the true false into here, and then we come back here, grab the vertex color, plug it into the true, so we use the actual vertex color value that is there for the emission color, and then it defaults to black, and then we plug this into the emission. So back in Unity, I've added a second lamppost just to indicate what's going on here. The vertex color material is the exact same, but this one has a blue effect and this one has a white effect. For example, if I come into Unity, we can see the object here. If I decide to change this blue to like a red, then I can set it and then export. Okay, so back in Unity, I drag in my lamp, let's scale it up, and then I'll throw on the vertex colored material, and this one has a bright red emissive. The only thing that really matters is the emissive threshold. So if I lower this, you can start to see every object is getting an emission based on its base value. There's one final thing you can do with this, and it's to apply vertex color data to a textured model. So for example, I have this wooden barrel. If I bring it up and I'll drag on the material, it has a brown color. But if I wanted to create a variety of models without having to create additional texture files, I can just set the vertex color data and then tint it. So if I go into Blender and I go into vertex paint, actually I'm going to go into edit mode just to make selecting the faces easier. I'm going to select this, 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 boom. So I have all of the wooden parts of the barrel selected. Then I'm going back into vertex paint. I'm going to select paint mode, and then I'm going to give it a slight red look. And then I'm going to set the vertex colors, export it, replace that, come into Unity, then I'm going to drag my barrel into the scene, bring it here, and then I already have a material file that I created and add it to the model. And so we have a slight red tint to it. You can do yellow. So for example, if I come up here and I didn't like the red, I can just always do like a yellow look, and then we can do barrel yellow. And then I drag this into it, and then boom, bring it up, and then I drag this same material and we have a yellow tint. Okay, and the way you set this up is you get your vertex color, you plug it into a multiply, and then you get the base color map, and then you sample the texture, plug it into the multiply, and it'll multiply it together, and then you plug it into the base color here. Well, I hope you learned something today, and or at least enjoyed listening to the sound of my voice. Like and subscribe, please. I want to quit my job and do this full time. Yeah. See you next time.